The Human Optimization Podcast is proudly brought to you by Vicon Supplements, where quality meets sustainability. Vicon's all-natural supplements are handcrafted and sustainably produced in Canada, bringing you products that nourish both your well-being and our planet. Visit viconsupplements.com today and be a part of a greener, healthier future.
I'm a hair mineral analysis expert. I have a background in functional medicine, and I educate people using HTMA testing to maximize health, erase debilitating symptoms, and gain energy. I'm a multi-time kettlebell sport world champion, and I'm constantly searching for high-performance pros from all over the world to bring you this human optimization podcast. My name is Lisa Pitel-Killah.
Hi everyone, it's Grace, one of the producers here on the Human Optimization Podcast. It's that time of year again where we want to take a moment to say thank you for joining us here on the podcast. Your support means the world to us. As we step into the new year, we've prepared something special, a year in review featuring Lisa's favorite podcast guests from 2023. So without further ado, let's get started. Happy New Year, everyone.
Progressing forward, progressing to get better without a mindset of perfectionism, because when you get that perfectionism, it really sets us up in so many ways. When you had just said, what you said when people say, well, I blew it, an actual phrase that a couple of researchers came up with, and they call it the what the hell effect.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And the what the hell effect is exactly the way you said it, and exactly the way people, what the hell, I've already blown it today, or I've already eaten a thing, or I already missed the workout, or I already did that. What the hell, I may as well, and then you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And so it's literally called the what the hell effect. And so we want to avoid that, and through our educational process, we teach people about things like that. So they're like, just to be aware, forearmed, forewarned, kind of thing. And so there are ways to minimize that, ways to bring down the catastrophic nature of that, ways to come at it from a more measured, emotionally fit perspective, because we look at weight management as in its kind of simplified form with having three legs. It's got a nutrition leg, it's got an activity leg, but it's got an emotional, mental fitness leg. And I say this kind of tongue in cheek. I don't really mean it literally, but I could teach you everything you need to know for healthy living with regard to nutrition in about an hour. I can teach you everything you need to know with regard to healthy living and longevity and whatnot with regard to activity and exercise in about an hour. The emotional fitness leg, though, is the most complex. It's the messiest, but it is the leg that keeps the nutrition and exercise legs solid. It's what keeps us on the more consistent path. It has us make the better decisions when life on some given stressful day would otherwise have, other plans and would have us going, what the hell, may as well. So that's kind of how I look at it. It's got the three legs. And so we approach it from the mindset of approaching all three legs with a heavy, heavy emphasis on the emotional fitness side.
Throughout the ages, all people have wanted to feel more turned on. Yeah. Because when you're turned on, you are really turned on to life. Your creativity is fueled by your desire, your horniness, your appetite. They're very, very similar types of things. So the people who are turned on and having a great sex life are having a great life. And aphrodisiacs have been around since people have been eating plants, which is forever. And I studied aphrodisiacs, things that really support people's libido and increase people's libido. And they are plants and foods, nutrients that essentially either work primarily on the hormone system, supporting hormonal production, and or they work on vascular blood flow. Yeah. And I think that blood flow is even more important than hormones. A lot of people think, especially women, they think, oh God, at menopause, my libido dropped off the cliff because my hormones changed. And that's actually erroneous thinking. Our estrogen drops, but our testosterone is actually higher than our estrogen in menopause and beyond. It's more that we've had a lifetime of very bad sex that hasn't been satisfying. And it's just like, we no longer really want to have sex because it's been not great for us.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I want to fix.
So zinc is super important for blood sugar regulation. It's the element of the pancreas. I always look at it that way. It's like iodine is for thyroid, zinc is for pancreas, and prostate, actually. Intimately involved in, the blood sugar regulation. So with the chronified stresses and the epigenetic, passing on of these stressors, we see these derailed larger mineral patterns. And I am not opposed to copper supplementation where it's needed, but we need to understand that under chronic stress, it is rather the zinc that goes out and gets lost first, not the copper. Copper equals like COMT as like a cofactor for an enzyme. It equals the superoxide dismutase that is cytosol based, where you have one copper, one zinc element working together. So copper driving estrogen, you have all these topics when it comes to copper, just like you have it with zinc, just like you would have it with manganese, so it's not like any of these elements is bad in itself.
Exactly. 100%.
They're all needed.
They're all needed. Just a matter of when, how,
and how
much,
and the balance, right?
Exactly. What do you think is one of the biggest environmental stressors?
It is EMF, hands down, without a shadow of a doubt. And the reason I say that is because of Arthur Furstenberg's work, The Invisible Rainbow. And he categorized the history of electricity in life, directly correlates it to increased shifts in our electromagnetic blanket of an atmosphere. So we not only have 130 years of data from when they introduced electricity in our homes, and then radio waves, Spanish flu, and then World War II, radar and satellites for Hong Kong flu, and then 5G, obviously the last several years. We have that whole time, like 130 years. But even before that, it was cosmic shifts that made people sick. So we know our environment, we're electromagnetic beings, we're one with our universe. When you mess with that field, the drop the mic moment, first minute of our talk, excuse me, when I said they're one directional, that's why, because we're not made that way. It is hands down the number one stressor on the body.
We found that in our research in terms of how to address thinning hair, there is a very strong component that's external that has to be addressed regardless of the internal setup. Basically, when our hair is thinning, here's the mechanics of it. There's lots of causes. There's stress, there's diet, there's illness, there's deficiencies, but the overall arcing cause is something called DHT, which any Google of why is my hair falling out? You'll see this term DHT flying around. Now, what that is and how it affects your hair is like this. It's pretty simple. Okay, so when your body breaks down the male hormone testosterone, it creates a byproduct called dihydrotestosterone, which is DHT. Now, this is just excreted through your body. It's not a big deal. However, here's where it becomes a big deal. When it passes by your hair follicle, our hair follicles have on them little DHT receptor sites, which for a visual is a pothole, like a pothole. So when the DHT, and by the way, this is the inherited trait. When people say hair loss is inherited, hair loss is not inherited. What's inherited are these potholes on the follicle. That's the inherited trait. So when someone has hair loss, it's a balance between how much testosterone they create or are creating at that moment, and how many potholes they have on their follicle. Potholes, not a technical term, but it's a nice visual, so I like using it because it's just clear. You know what I mean? And so, so as the DHT passes by the follicle, it gets stuck in the pothole, and when it gets stuck, it cuts off a little bit of the blood flow. Now, over time, as more and more gets stuck, less and less blood starts being delivered to the follicle, and the follicle begins to get weaker and weaker, and then it eventually dies. As it gets weaker and weaker, it gets thinner and thinner, and dies. So our goal has always been to get that DHT off the follicle so the blood can start flowing back to the follicle on its own. And then we start bombarding that follicle with stem cells, probiotics, amino acids. So we're helping it rebuild with the blood flow coming back to it and the stem cells and amino acids helping rebuild it at the same time. So we're really fortifying it to get it back, get it back to a strong, healthy state so it can start to produce strong, healthy hair again.
Yeah. Yeah. When we think about productivity, I feel like nowadays we are all short on time, right? Everybody's running around and they're trying to find more time. And you hear people say, oh, I wish I had another 8 hours in every day. I might be able to get done what's on my to-do list. And so how do you kind of take that productivity to the next level to be able to manage that?
Well, I have a lot of people that say exactly what you just said, but we all have the same amount of time. Unfortunately, most people waste their time a lot of hours during the day and they don't even realize it, right? So it's about getting in control of your life. It's about organizing your life. But I developed a method not too long ago in my latest book called the IZOD method. IZOD stands for In the Zone on Demand. And so the first part of that when I help clients is we need to really make sure they're living their purpose. Some people are not living their purpose, they know. Other people are barely tapping into it. And so first with my mentees, I really got to make sure they're living their purpose, because without that passion, without that fire, without knowing what your superpowers are, you're never going to be performing at your highest potential. So first, purpose. Once we establish that purpose, we need to get organized. We need to get in control of our agenda, our calendar. We need to make a plan. What are our dreams? What are our goals? What are the stepping stones towards those? What are the people, or who are the people that we have to surround ourselves with? Because we don't want to work and waste time on working on our weaknesses. We got to continue to work on our strengths. However, we need to know our weaknesses so we can hire the people or surround ourselves with people that are strong where we are weak. So what is the team that we need? And we've both in sports. So a good analogy is the 110-meter hurdles for men at the Olympics or the 100 meters for women, because think about it, they're not by themselves. They got a running coach, they got a strength coach, they got probably a nutritionist, then they got a mental, a coach, and then they got their family to support them, and the list goes on.
Yeah. And so for those of you who are listening rather than watching, I want to describe, so this cylinder, right, we're in Tom's lab basically, and this cylinder is on the desk, and he literally just held up a light bulb and the light bulb turned on once he got close to that cylinder.
Here's another indication. This is another fluorescent tube. It's still in its factory packaging.
It's literally in its factory packaging.
And when I pace it close to the instrument, the free energy of scalar energy will animate the light bulb.
That is incredible. The light is literally on and it's still in its package.
Now, how does that benefit people? Now, keep in mind, this is a new science. When I work with people by way of their photograph. I'm going to hold up my photograph.
Yep.
My photograph is my signature. A piece of paper, even though it's a photograph, has my signature. It has my spirit. It has my mind. It has my body attached to that. So I don't work with people. I work with photographs, which is the bilocated version of a person.
Yep.
I don't care where you live in the world. If you email me your photograph, I can place it in the instrument. And now you're under the influence of scalar energy.
Wow.
So people never visit me. I never work in the flesh. I work in the quantum.
Yeah.
This is quantum healing.
Yeah.
Healing through a force field or through an energy field. It's not a biological process. I don't use chemicals. I only use light, and I access a person not directly, but through their photograph, which is their bilocated version.
I feel like, in terms of in North America, or at least the United States, we're having more home births. Like what's the trend now? Is it more home births because of that kind of, almost like, I want to say, that sterile environment of the hospital that can kind of strip some of that unnecessary bacteria from babies?
So I think that there's an uptick in home births now because we live in a post-COVID time.
Oh, that's true.
So I was a labor and delivery doula at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
And I saw the changes. And I also saw with some of my clients how difficult it was for them. They knew that if the hospital allowed, they were only allowed one support person. And so if they already had a doula, then they either had to say their doula couldn't come or their husband couldn't come. Sometimes neither were allowed, and you just had your iPad with you. And I did a few virtual doula things with clients. And so the switching to home birth, or this big like influx to home birth, I think is in part because of those regulations put by hospital administration.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing more women who don't want interventions. And research, or not, I guess research, statistics are showing that C-section rates are increasing, and the cascade of interventions starts with one thing, and then something else is happening. So now we're adding in this, and then we're adding in this, and then you end up with a C-section. And so if you have a normal low risk birth, there's no reason that you couldn't give birth at home.
Right.
Insofar as you have a competent team to support you in that.
Yeah.
And so many women, at least the ones that I'm coming in contact with, are seeing that is a viable option, and pursuing it, knowing that they don't want something unnecessarily.
And then, of course, I thought I was a mom of four for 7 years. And then 7 years later, bam, this baby came in 2021. So, that fear, of course, in 2014, when I had my son, I was 34 years old. And of course, all my pregnancy, I've not really had like complication as per se with all my pregnancies. They've been pretty healthy pregnancies. But then now being pregnant and having a baby at 41, oh my goodness, of course, everybody's, advanced maternal age, all of that. But, of course, it came with shock, surprise, all that, mental and everything. But physically, I was so much in good shape than when I was 34. Because remember, 34, I haven't found functional medicine. I was still struggling with all different stuff, stress, how to manage my stress, physical health, all that. There were many things going on in my body, of course. And I know in 2014, when I remember being pregnant at that time, my whole body will hurt, like everywhere. And I was in a stressful job, and different things were happening. Oh my goodness, I didn't even know how that pregnancy. And I remember I talked to my mom, like, why am I hurting? Like, I didn't even have this in my first pregnancy. And my mom was like, you're older. I'm like, older? I'm not that old, But then now, when I now became pregnant in my 40s, like, I was, okay, first of all, I was like, oh Lord, I hope, they have high risk pregnancy, all this stuff. And I was just chilling, like, look, I know all this, I have all my tools, and I know all this stuff, of course, maybe with experience too as well, but I will attribute it to being that I knowing functional medicine, because before getting pregnant, I feel I had gotten a lot of healing. This healing process continues, but I've gotten a lot of healing. And I joke about it a lot, like, maybe I was too healthy, that's why I got pregnant, got pregnant like that. Okay.
Actually, 15 years, I had been like all about my health. And we come back from this amazing vacation where we went to France. And after the vacation, not during the vacation, but after the vacation, my hair started falling out in droves. I gained 9 pounds, and I had this rash. Like, it was one of the, it was on my eyelids, under my nose, and under my chin. And I wanted to rip my face off.
Yeah.
And right before I went on my trip, I did this testing for mycotoxins. And when I got back from my trip, I learned, I actually have 5 strains of mycotoxins. Those are the toxins that mold puts out. So I started treating that, but it didn't fix the hair loss and the weight gain. The rash got a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward another few months, and I'm listening to the radio, and I hear that when Notre Dame burned, it released 500 tons of lead dust into the air. And the closer you were to Notre Dame, the more exposure you got, and the farther away, the less. That makes sense, right? That, you're near the epicenter. Well, guess what? I spent a week at the epicenter. And I remember remarking, like, God, it's so dusty here. And it was lead dust. Wow. So I said to my husband, oh my God, I got an exposure. I got a lead exposure. And then I said, we all got it, but I'm the one who's sick from it.
Right.
So I did the testing, and, you know, I have access to this testing. So I did the testing on myself in the past, and I was slightly positive. And now this is how doctors are bad patients. Not knowing then what I know now, I blew it off. And so when I did the repeat on the lead test, it was now noticeably positive. And I was like, crap, I really got a lead exposure.
Yeah.
So then I said, well, you know, I have the mycotoxins and I have the lead and I had mercury. It's not so hard to expect that I would have other toxins. So I tested for environmental toxins, other environmental. That's like gasoline fumes and plastic, styrene, flame retardants. And I had a whole slew of those. And I said to my husband, oh my God, I'm such a dirty girl. And that was the impetus for writing the book, Dirty Girl, because I was like, if I'm the poster child for healthy living and healthy eating and exercise and sleep and all that, and here's where I am after living like that, what does everyone else have?
So when something happens to us, signal gets shoot to the brain, goes through the spinal cord, crosses the pathways, goes into the brain. So in the brain, there are 16 centers all across the brain, 16 different places where pain is processed. 5% of the cells in those 16 centers are having role to process the pain, to protect us, to send the signal back to the body and say, hey, slow down, I'm hurting, you know, I do need time to heal. So if pain persists longer than 3 months, the longer it persists, more and more of those centers, cells in those pain centers, take function of processing pain. So now we have 10, 15, 20, sometimes up to 25% of those pain centers, cells process pain. And that is the reason brain gets very busy with processing pain. It changes its own structure, it changes physiology, it changes anatomy, and it's very hard to step outside that. And that is one of the reasons we have such a huge problem as a society, because that problem is not easy to solve.
Right.
For short period of time, you know, we all know sometimes it is necessary for short period of time to deal with different type of painkillers, and that is okay, you know, if there is something acute, of course, you know, again, we do need that place of peace for body to do what body knows how to do. However, the longer it takes, body just recognizes it, and those pathways, you know, got overcome. Brain just says, no, I'm not going to allow that whatever medication one is taking to block that pain pathway. I'm just going to reroute it and do my thing, and again scream at the body, I'm hurting, I'm hurting. So yes, sources of the pain are really individual. So the longer somebody is, it gets harder to step in. It's not impossible. That's one of the reasons we always educate our clients, or, you know, wherever we can, we say, okay, as long as you get cleared by your medical community and your pain persists, seek help. At least get educated what you need to do. The longer it lasts, the harder it is going to be for your brain to repattern those pain pathways.
So let's talk about some wellness secrets, right? Everybody
Sure.
wants a little insight into something. And so kind of tips from some of those stories or some of those elite athletes that people can apply to their day-to-day life. What would that be?
So I think as a starting point, like as we get into some of the rituals, and there are 7, as I started to work with these individuals, my intention initially was to tell their life story and reveal their strategies for dealing with adversity, for preparing and recovering from a peak performance event, and then reveal the secrets behind their self-care practices. And I do that. Each of the 21 individuals featured in the book, they have sort of their own little section where I reveal their story. But as I got into these interviews and working with these individuals, I discovered that there was this common ground. And so the youngest of the 21 is in her late 20s. She's Kamika Bingham. She's one of Canada's fastest women and competes in 2 Olympics. And her strategies for self-care are the same as the CEO and publisher for the Globe and Mail, Philip Crawley, or Jim Tree Living from Dragon's Den and Boston Pizza. And those gentlemen are reaching 80. And so the common ground is the practice of these 7 wellness rituals. And so before we dive into the specifics of those, I think what's really important is that there's a distinction between habits and rituals. And the reason I call them rituals is because there's this intention behind the practice of these simple strategies. And when you bring that intention and you learn to stack these behaviors, this is when we gain access to the body's healing potential. So it's not an add-on. It's not like, where am I going to fit my self-care in? These individuals lay these strategies down and they cultivate their formula with a great pride, and their formulas are constantly evolving. And so that's the part that I found really inspiring.
What I came up with was the fact that I had this insulin resistance. And I thought, okay, so now what I'm learning is that what I'm eating and what I'm ingesting, what I'm consuming is in fact perpetuating my ill health. The headaches, the bloatedness, the weight gain, these are all byproducts of what I was putting in my body. And, I think in the back of my mind and my subconscious, I knew that there was going to have to be some kind of lifestyle overhaul. And it wasn't until I really started to dig in for myself, because it wasn't that I went to my doctor. It wasn't even that I went to my naturopath to figure out the solutions. I really had to know for myself what it was. And so, while I was surprised to learn that I could control these physical symptoms by changing my diet, I was blown away, because we are so conditioned and programmed to eat a certain way, with even the government food guide, with the standard Canadian, standard American, standard Western diet. I was really dumbstruck that it was really my food choices that were contributing to all of these ailments, and these big kind of, light bulbs went off for me. And from then on, I just started digging in. I started, listening to podcasts, listening to all about health. I really dug in, and I thought, no, this is life-changing. This is going to change me, and I'm going to be successful, because now I understand how the body works. I'm ready because I've hit this rock bottom. And now it's about me. Now it's about me making conscious choices, instead of, really relying on, what society is doing or what mainstream anything is telling us in terms of our diet and how we live our lives.
Let's talk a little bit share about your book. Tell us about that. Like obviously you've got tons of inspiration about why you wanted to write this, but give us some tidbits and let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I wrote the book. We changed the title a little bit. So it's Quit Proof: 7 Strategies to Build Resilience and Achieve Your Life Goals.
Okay.
Yes.
I love it.
I do. I'm so excited about it. I will tell you that writing the book was harder than climbing the mountains, because I don't sit still very well. And so having to sit in a chair and then having my thoughts are very ADD. So I had all these thoughts everywhere, and then trying to funnel them into, okay, here's lessons that people can actually utilize and take away.
Not an easy task.
Not an easy task, but super rewarding, because now I can talk about it and be very precise. So then it's easy for people to extract what they need from the lessons. So the book was fun. It's super exciting because I quit on myself. And once I realized that was a choice I made and I could do something different. And I figured out how to run a business, be a mom, and do things that got me excited. I was like, I have to share this. I have to, I want other people to have these tools so they can do and feel the way I feel. And I would say one of the big lessons from the book is wave your flag. And I know this sounds silly, but when you think about people climbing mountains, you always see the picture at the top of the mountain where somebody's waving their flag, right? And it's really easy for us to wave our flags when we're at the top of our mountains. Metaphorically and physically. But when we're not at the top of our mountains, it's just as important to wave our flag, because it allows other people to know where we are, how they can help, and how we can help.
I served on the advisory committee at Health and Human Services for 4 years on MACSF, myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome. And part of what we did was we interfaced with the public to give advice to the head of HHS about what policy changes should be made. And it was absolutely criminal when we heard story after story about people who had been gaslighted by the profession, people who've been told they're crazy, people who have been told this doesn't exist. And it wasn't until 2018 where the NIH finally said, yeah, chronic fatigue syndrome's a real thing.
Yeah.
And prior to that, people were dismissed and told they were crazy, and this has to change. And so the important thing is that A, it's real, and post-COVID is what kind of tripped that off for the chronic fatigue crew. And chronic pain that we see with post-COVID. But we have to understand that actually we've got a lot of research that shows us what's going on in these individuals, and we have a lot of research that can direct our care for these individuals. And we're going to have to think a little bit outside the box. So we're no longer going to be able to stick to, you've got strep, we give you an antibiotic, you go home and you're done.
Right.
We have to look at, okay, you've got strep, we treated that, but now you're still sick.
Yeah.
So now we have to look at the immune system, and then what testing we do to look at the immune system. But maybe we want to back up also and go, wait. Not everybody who gets strep develops pandas. Why is that? Not everybody who develops Lyme disease gets post-Lyme disease. And the answer is about 20% on both of those. Not everybody who gets COVID gets post-COVID syndrome. The answer there, about 20-25%. So it's really interesting that we've got this about a quarter to a fifth of the population that ends up developing these chronic conditions. And so now we got to back up and say, well, what's going on? And indeed, when we do that, then we get back to, well, their immune systems are weakened by these epigenetic things. Epigenetic are these things on top of it. So it's the environmental factors. So a certain amount of these are child abuse. A certain amount of these are poisonings. So a certain amount of these are toxicities. And a certain amount of these is some of the medications we've used.
Right.
So we have to rethink this. We have to look at what's going on in the gut microbiome and the health of the gut and the foods that people are eating, because they can set us up for all kinds of chronic illness as well.
If you don't know what mutation you have, you do run the risk of as you keep taking methylfolate to get you into overmethylation.
Right.
Which
So
is the excess.
Let's touch on that, because I think that happens more than people realized.
Yeah. So they start taking it and they start feeling good. And all of a sudden they're not feeling good anymore.
Yeah.
That's a good sign that they probably went into overmethylation. So if you're not methylating well, is a problem. But if you're overmethylating is also a problem. So on everything in life, there's a balance, right? The difference between medicine and poison is the dosage.
It's so true. That is a beautiful statement. That is absolutely true. It's everything in moderation, because one extreme, I was talking to somebody earlier today and we were talking about, overactivity just in a certain function in the body versus underactivity. I'm like, well, the more overactive something is, it's going to cause just as much fatigue as it being underactive.
Yes.
So you need to have that imbalance to be able to have energy efficiency and be able to have that stamina that you really want. So it is absolutely very true. Thanks for listening to today's show. Head over to LisaPitel-Killah.com to gain access to some amazing free resources that will help you gain energy, erase debilitating symptoms, and be the best version of you. Remember to give this podcast a like and follow me on social media at Lisa Pitel-Killah. I'm here every 2 weeks with a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. Until next time.